Yes, we want to talk about the power of democracy. So we have the Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, here, and I want to introduce the other two panelists. So first up, we have Maria Ressa. She is an award-winning journalist, Nobel Peace Prize laureate 2021. She's the CEO and the co-founder of Rappler, which is a digital-only news organization based in the Philippines, also an author. We're very honored to have you here with us. Maria Ressa, welcome to the Global Media Forum. Please take a seat. And then we said, why should we only invite one award-winning journalist when we can have two? And that is why we decided to ask Carlton Scovia Nakamiya to join us here. She is the founder and the CEO of Her Story Uganda, also here to give us her perspectives from that part of the world. Welcome, Carlton. All right, so the power of democracy, that is our topic. This year, Germany celebrated 75 years of democracy. Annalena Baerbock, I want to put the first question to you. How would you analyze the state of democracy in this country?
Well, first of all, for me, democracy is never finished, because democracy is about life, and life is never finished. We always value it even more, and this is good. So growing up every day is just normal human behavior, and this also counts for me for democracies. We can get better every day, and if we look at our democracy, for example, in, we have to say, 75 years Western Germany, then also the eastern part, where we were reunificated. So you can see already in our history that our constitution and what then also changed after reunification made us stronger afterwards. But if we look, for example, as women's rights in our constitution, or Article 3, everybody has the same right, starting with gender and then being also broadened to other groups of society, where today, like my kids would say, well, this is just normal because they grew up in this kind of society, but back 50 years it was not normal. So you can see that democracy grow every day, but we also see obviously that democracy didn't fall from the sky, but we have to protect it, and that also rights which we achieved in the past, that there could be a backlash. And if we are looking at the gender question, for example, that also in the European Union, something which I would say is just normal, is being challenged in these times.
Tell us exactly what you mean by that.
Well, for example, when we stay with the example of gender, we had a very gender-inclusive language in all European Union texts, and suddenly there's an issue whether, with regard to the question of gender, we should use the female and male connotation. In English it's a bit difficult, or even if you don't decide on your gender, if we put a marker there, that everybody can choose their own identity by themselves, even though we have a legal regulation on that by now. It is challenged in some discussions to say no, and we see obviously that there's a backlash. If we look to the United States and the right of abortion on the other hand. So I think there are also many things, and I'm focusing on European Union or on US, because I would like to underline that even in so-called strong and old democracies, we cannot take our rights, which I would say grandmothers have achieved for my generation, as granted, and this is why we have to defend them every day.
So you're saying it's a work in progress. And of course, on paper, all the three of you live in democracies, but I want to turn to you, Maria, now, because your country, the Philippines, had some very rough years under President Rodrigo Duterte. Really, he made headlines across the world, his fight against the war on drugs, where we saw extrajudicial killings. You personally and Rappler were attacked. So where do you stand now? You now have a new president. For the past few years, you've had a new president.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I would say we were in hell, and now we're in purgatory.
So a bit of improvement there.
Well, my worry is that the world is heading to hell, right? As early, even before the Nobel lecture in 2021, we were looking at the data, and it points to 2024 as a tipping point year. This is a critical year for democracy. And what you had spoken about, Minister Baerbock, I mean, if you look at it, on my Twitter feed, I hate to send you to X, but at least we're all there, you will see a gendered misogyny, gender disinformation report that we've done in Brazil, another one in Moldova. And you will see all around the world that women journalists, there was in 2022 a report by UNESCO and ICFJ, 300-page report, and there are several women journalists who are in that book, who were pounded online. If you were a woman in 2017 in the Philippines, you were attacked at least 10 times more than men. The number of attacks I was getting was not 90 hate messages per day, it was 90 hate messages per hour. Per hour, right? So that is meant to pound you to silence. And what we are seeing across the board, I will say Alexandra Geese led this fight with the EU, where the Digital Services Act, fighting for our digital rights. Part of the reason women are under attack is because the design of the social media platforms allow it. In fact, when you have a leader like Rodrigo Duterte or Donald Trump, they give everyone permission to do it. And these stereotypes are there, so you can roll back very quickly. The last thing is Vera Jourova herself has said that women politicians, you've been under attack. Hillary Clinton in the United States was ground zero for this in 2016. Laila de Lima, a senator in the Philippines, not only was torn apart online, where it was sexually explicit photos, doctored, even before generative AI, but she spent almost 7 years in prison. So to answer your questions, because you should speak, I'm purgatory, hoping for better, but in order to come here today, I still have to ask for permission to travel from the Supreme Court all the way up. I could still go to jail for up to 7 years, and my company can still get shut down. For 8 years, these attacks have continued, and to expect your journalists to continue working, despite that, well, we do it anyway, but there's something wrong. There must be laws against this. And I will go back to when we lost our gatekeeping powers to big tech. Big tech's business model, surveillance for profit, enabled not only attacks against journalists, attacks against women, but in their own report, Facebook, Meta, now called Meta, genocide in Myanmar, right? Online violence is real world violence, and we journalists know this firsthand.
Well, you have given us a lot to digest, a lot to unpack. I want to bring Carlton into the conversation now because you are from Uganda. You've had President Yoweri Museveni for almost 40 years. He's been in power. He's an autocrat. So tell us about how the pillars of democracy have been shaken in your country.
Thank you very much. First of all, there is a lot of censorship in Uganda. The media is not free to function as it is expected. Just a few weeks ago, one of the newspapers, The Observer, was served with summons by the Media Council for simply writing a story that portrayed the Ugandan parliament as MPs were bribed allegedly with 2 million shillings to silence a certain debate. And so the Media Council summoned The Observer that you are tainting the image of the National Assembly. This is not the kind of journalism we want to see. Good enough, The Observer didn't turn up, didn't react to these summons because they told them, you don't have the mandate to summon us. We will meet in court. So that's just an example of the kind of censorship we face. This does not only come from the ruling party or the government and the state apparatus, but also the different political parties in Uganda. Just recently, we had female journalists beaten by one of the opposition political party bodyguards for simply recording scenes that they never wanted to be recorded. And when we came up to advocate for press freedom, for a free press, they turned against each personality that raised the voices. So there are a number of propagandists, social media accounts that are deployed to go personal, to go body shaming, to simply tone you down. And so it's upon us to choose how we counter such attacks against the media.
All right, so we're seeing attacks on a personal level, we're seeing attacks on an institutional level. If a newspaper, which is actually one of the leading newspapers in Uganda, The Observer, is being summoned. So let's share solutions. Let's talk about how you individually and your organizations deal with that. Annalena Baerbock, I want to ask you, because Maria said that you, of course, have also had massive hate speech written against you. How do you deal with that on a personal level? You're also just a human being.
Well, first of all, it's so important to connect. And this sounds so simple, but I mean, the target is to single out people and to make them feel that they are the only person feeling this kind of situation. And now becoming a foreign minister, and it was like in my election campaign running here as a chancellor, we could see that there was like so much more fake news, and especially what Maria Ressa talked about, not only fake news on different topics, but fake news as a woman. And back then I thought, well, this is just a weird coincidence, and even some people told me, well, don't talk about it. But for example, there was like the fake news that I was a prostitute, and I thought, well, this is just crazy, just ignore it. But then I went to the Philippines 3 years later, we spoke, and the senator who used to be a justice minister was with us in the discussion, and I wasn't sure whether I should cry or laugh, because what she told me, I felt, oh my God, this is what I've experienced, thanks God, on a lower level, but that it was targeted on the former justice minister there, because she couldn't be drawn out of the political debate by real hardcore topic, and suddenly there was this sexual dimension with regard of her, what Maria just talked about. And coming back now to my own experience, then back in time in the election campaign saying that I was a porno star, it was done really badly, so everybody who could see saw, okay, this is not true, but suddenly, like half a year ago in Serbian media, it was in a public TV debate, there was a picture again, same picture, saying, well, wasn't she a porno star back in time? And you think, oh my God, so obviously it's no coincidence, but this is a situation what we see, what so many women can also speak about when we hear the narratives from Putin on Ukraine. I mean, it's a question about raping a country. So obviously there's a whole dimension of sexualizing, as you just said, and there's a
How do you deal with that then? Like, because I believe that that will also serve as an example. If we talk about we need more inclusion, we need women to be part of society, part of these democratic processes, they are being silenced in this way. So, do you have solutions for that?
Well, this is one of the reasons why we formulated a feminist foreign policy in the foreign ministers, because if women are not safe in a society, no one is safe. And this is something a woman told me before the full invasion in Ukraine, who I met at the former so-called contact line between the eastern territories of Ukraine and the Ukraine mainland, and the west part of Ukraine. And this understanding that if women are coming under attack, a whole society is going to collapse. This is what we have seen, what you described. We saw it in Russia also back in time. They changed the law on domestic violence, and then they changed other laws, then they addressed the free media speeches. So the yardstick of women's rights in societies, in my point of view, is a crucial one, and this is why we have to speak up as foreign ministers, as with the feminist foreign policy, as journalists, as people, as businessmen, when we see women's rights are coming under pressure, that this is a danger for whole society. On a positive dimension, what we can also see, if we include women, for example, in peace negotiations, peace treaties last longer, so it has also this positive dimension. And asking your question, so what you're doing, this is why what I said, a feminist foreign policy is for me a very important part for protecting societies, but also to ensuring that democracies are resilient.
Carlton. Your publication, your online news organization is called Her Story Uganda. Why was it important specifically to tell her story? Was that not being done in Uganda?
The last 10 years before establishing Her Story with two colleagues, I served in a patriarchal society, in newsrooms that never prioritized women's voices and stories about women. But this is a phenomenon I've seen across Africa and so many other regions of the world. Let me give an example of the presidency of Joyce Banda in 2012 to 2014. This was the second African female president that was able to accelerate the economy of Malawi from 1.6 to around 4.8%. Look at how far Samia Suluhu has pushed Tanzania. Let's watch out for Mexico. Claudia has won an election. The minister here was talking about her feminist-focused foreign policy. I want us to reflect on how much we have, as the media, how much have we paid attention to these distinguished women leaders across the world. And so that informs why we do the work we do. The media doesn't mainly focus on the successes and holding women leaders accountable. They prefer taking the stereotypical role, the letting women down, but yet they can achieve, and they have achieved. And so that is why we do what we do.
Mm-hmm. So you're giving them the kind of spotlight that was missing. Maria, how vital is that for the building of our democracies?
When women are under attack, women in the public eye, that's the first step to the degradation of a democracy. And you're seeing this in information operations, right? So, I mean, look at, in the Moldova report, you will see attacks against Moldova's president, Maya Sandu. You will see Madeleine Albright all the way back 7 or 8 years ago. There's a group she formed, hashtag not the cost. Women are always attacked first. Actually, women and journalists, right? We're the first front line. And so if you're a woman journalist, you got to get ready for this stuff. And the kinds of things that they've described, it's sexualization. In most of our countries, prostitutes, India, you know this one, right? Because I think it traveled from the United States to India. Prostitutes. So women journalists are prostitutes, prostitutes. It's a whole denigration. And then the kind of sexualization. And then the other part, it moves into dehumanization. And that dehumanization.
So how can we reverse that trend?
Very easily. You keep working, right? That's the easy part. You put a feminist, I mean, on our case, it was really by looking at the data. And that's, I think, one of the things, you know, in the earlier panels, I would say social media is, at best, a frenemy because the data has been weaponized. Each of us, on Facebook alone, for example, every one of us on Facebook has more than 2,200 data points, separate data points, that they do not actually have permission from us to take, right? But they put them together, they create a model, they say model, let's call it a clone. They clone us, and then artificial intelligence comes in and takes all of our clones. That becomes the motherlode database that is used for micro-targeting. Micro-targeting is not advertising. Micro-targeting is selling your weakest moment to a message, to a company or a country. Russian disinformation, Chinese disinformation. In my case, it was disinformation, information operations by my own government. Right? Let me just move to the dehumanization because that part is scary. That dehumanization, if you are under attack, whether you're a man or a woman, and it moves to dehumanization, in my case, it was taking male genitals and then putting my face on top of it. In the case of someone like Patricia Campos Melo from Brazil, I saw some of the folks from Brazil, it was taking her face and putting it on, again, dehumanizing animal parts. In Malta, Daphne Caruana Galizia, the dehumanization that she went through was right before she was assassinated,
Yeah,
right?
the journalist that was murdered.
A journalist in Malta who went after corruption. Okay, so what do? Well, Patricia Campos Melo filed a case against Bolsonaro, father and son, and won, guys. She won. So that case is still ongoing. But I think we need laws in place. The impunity of the tech companies are as bad as the impunity that we are seeing from Putin, for example, right? I thought twice about, but I would suggest it's not just Putin, it is also Netanyahu. Sorry. Because I think what's at stake here is does the international rules-based order still work? And that's something we're all counting on. We want it to work. So how do we fight back? We organize ourselves. We realize that we need to demand better from tech. That's the first step. The second one is, as journalists, why are we all not working together? Why are we not collaborating to demand better from tech, right? This is now the distribution. And finally, I always talk about the EU, the European Union, has won the race of the turtles in terms of the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act and the AI Act, which won't go into place until next year. So what do we do in the meantime? It's just us. Why would the Writers Guild Association in America, as soon as generative AI goes out, why are they able to act and we journalists do not? But let me bring it back to Uganda. Even as we're all just kind of talking to each other now, VDEM in Sweden, as of this year, January this year, said that 71% of the world is now under authoritarian rule. It is slipping. But our window to act, while closing, is still there. This is why we must act.
All right, so you raised 2 points. I want to go to the minister first. We're talking about laws. You mentioned the Digital Services Act. So that forces digital companies, tech companies, to take down hate speech and speech that has been reported to be violent and these kinds of things to be taken off as quickly as possible. You said that is a good step, but it was a slow one. You said that you want regulation of AI. Why is that not happening?
Because in democracies, you always need majorities. And this is, I think, which we should always remember ourselves also when we say very easily there's obviously the battle between autocracies and democracies, that there are moments where one might think democracy is slower. And then people might feel, okay, maybe this is a constitutional form which is not so helpful in crisis. So this is why the reason is, in these times of crisis, we even have to work harder and stronger together. And we have to be frank, we missed it in the last years to work together, especially with, between the European Union and the United States, where obviously the big companies, the tech companies are based there, to organize or to regulate these kind of services. And I think it was a strong asset of the European Union then to say, okay, we don't wait any longer, but we have to take it in our own hands, because otherwise we cannot counter it. But we are at the starting point there, because we see this fake news going on. So there are also different debates in my country, but also, for example, in Ireland, if they are seeing like immediate deep fake. And I mean, we all know if it's like after 4 weeks, then somehow it's being articulated as fake or has been taken down, then it's way too late. Yeah, it has spread already all over and you cannot counter it anymore. So it's not about regulation only, it's also how can we react quick. And for example, in Ireland, they are having the debate, and I'm mentioning it here because we are starting this debate also in Germany, to set up a board, because obviously, again, in a democracy, yeah, you cannot say, okay, it's government who decides this is fake or this is deep fake or this is the truth. So you have to find bodies, and there they set up a different bodies of judges and journalists and also part of government to say, okay, we can just act quickly and say this is under checking. So at the moment, maybe we're not clear yet, but obviously there's something wrong. And I think this is, we have to think about regulation, but also about being very pragmatic on this issue, and we have to discuss openly, and I have to come back to your small sentence, then also where we might see things differently, because not everything is fake, but it's different bubbles, or it's what you see, and when you said Putin and Netanyahu, obviously I see it differently, to put it not in the same sentence, but again, it's about sharing informations in our realities, because so what is right and wrong looking at the Middle East? For example, I've been there also many, many times. But if you cannot go to Gaza, if there's no free reporting anymore, if journalists are being killed, for me it's very hard, even though I'm discussing with the Israeli government to say also in self-defense, you have an obligation under humanitarian law to say this has been now a war crime or not, because I've not been there, I cannot judge it on the place. So I think, therefore, also for us here, it's so important to discuss openly where we might say, okay, maybe we look at a perspective from a different angle and we respect that you see it from the other side, because I think the other danger is that everybody just pulls back in their own bubble, only speaks to people who see it exactly like I'm seeing it. And I always have this picture for kids in schools. If we are sitting like this, I have a 6 here and you have a 9, I can tell you 100 times this is the 6, but if I'm capable of saying, okay, I change my perspective, I take her seat, then I can see that from her perspective it might be also a 9. And this is, I think, what it's all about, to always keep the human face and the human dimension.
Yes, thank you. And just for our audience, we have a panel tomorrow morning about how to cover the conflict in the Middle East, because I see that we were going in that direction. Now, I want to just bring back Carlton into the conversation, because during one of the panels earlier, one panelist from Mozambique said that social media has ushered in another wave of democratization, especially in Southern Africa. Is that something that you're seeing, especially in a country where the traditional media is being censored by those in power?
I agree. To some extent, social media has given a platform to companies that are censored to carry on their work. It is also a platform that so many citizens use to hold leaders accountable. And so, to some extent, it is being put to good use, but we must also not ignore the fact that there are so many accounts that bot accounts and other that are deployed to spread fake news, propaganda, disinformation. In my country, a few months ago, the EU fell victim to the disinformation. Somebody doctored a document and put it on social media that the EU has funded some people to carry on some work. And so it took them, of course they responded to the attack, but that shows how much disinformation can affect even such organizations. So if the tech companies, like Maria said, do not react, actually, for me, I would like to see these tech companies incorporate all the local languages, because much as the focus is on English, Portuguese, French, and other major languages, we also have other local languages that are widely followed, and they have quite a large subscription. So if fake news, disinformation is spread in a local language that the tech companies didn't incorporate, it's hard to counter such. So much as we use such platforms, social media, to see that we democratize and bypass censorship, yes, we also have to consider this.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we're looking for solutions to allow democracies to be more inclusive and to have diverse voices heard. Maria, you want to add to that?
Yes, so I will give you a solution because we pulled it up to a high level thing. But first of all, you have to understand that there is, and I will use the title of an upcoming book by a former EU member of parliament, Marichka Schaake, right? She has a book coming out, it's called The Tech Coup. Every day that legislation doesn't happen, for whatever reason, the tech coup continues, because your cup of coffee has more regulations in place to get to you than these platforms that we carry everywhere with us, right? So the insidious manipulation, not just of algorithms, not just of artificial intelligence, but now when you have generative AI, where you can create, I've had several deep fakes done of me now, which sound like me, look like me, but isn't me. We can create Annalena Baerbock now, right? And you will not be able to tell the difference, so you will not be able to tell fact from fiction. There's a phrase that was coined by Cory Doctorow. He said, what will happen now is we are going to get so much crap thrown at us that it's called the enshittification of the internet. And we will be forced out. So what do? Right? So number one, this is something that Dmitry Muratov and I, along with about 300 Nobel laureates, civil society groups, different groups, and frankly, Germany has been at the forefront of a lot of this, right? Alexander Gies, again, I keep saying, because we've championed, it is not about content. It's about data. It's about algorithms. It is not about freedom of speech or censorship. So please take that away. Number one.
That is very contrary to what we have been hearing all morning. Because
and that's the problem. Yes.
But of course, again, diverse voices and different perspectives.
I have the evidence to show you. Yeah. And I will tweet it afterwards, right? This is about data and tech. It is not about content. Please, guys, right? You know this. So we came out with a 10-point action plan in 2022, and these are the high-level things that really every law should include. The first, stop surveillance for profit, right? Surveillance capitalism was a new business model, and these tech companies have optimized for profit at the cost of every single citizen that is on their platform. 1. 2, stop coded bias, right? What do I mean by that? The tech that has come into us, especially in the global south, means that if you are LGBTQ+, if you are a woman, if you are brown or black or marginalized in the real world, you are further marginalized online. That's 2. 3, journalism is an antidote to tyranny. Who but journalists will stand up to a dictator and ask the tough questions in the most polite of ways, right? And yet, if you're a digital news site, because of actions by big tech, you may die. Our websites may die within a year. And I will tweet that again. Read the future of news. So those are 3 things, right? We have to move at the pace of tech, but the world does not have to accept it. It is the least regulated industry globally. And yet, it hacks our biology by manipulating our emotions to change the way we feel, heightening the spread of hate. Why are we so polarized? That's also a tech-driven thing. And then when that happens, because you change the way you feel, you're angry, you're afraid, you're hateful, you act in the real world. And that moves into politics. Again, that's a direct link. If we do not have integrity of facts, we will not have integrity of elections.
Thank you very much. Annalena Baerbock, I saw you nodding. That is something you agree with, right?
So sorry, just to jump in, I am not, what you said, Minister Baerbock, I completely agree with you in terms, and I'm so sorry if I've offended anyone, because apparently on social media, you offend everybody when you speak, right? Because for some reason, I am now both a CIA agent and a communist. I'm both anti-Semitic, and I am also anti-Palestinian. You cannot be both, all those things. They're all lies. So yes, agree.
Yeah, and I nodded because of if we cannot talk about facts anymore, obviously everybody constructs its own reality, and then we do not have a common denominator. And this is the end, there I totally agree, of democracy. And this is why fighting for facts and working on it is so important, and maybe also moving from out of geopolitical topics like the climate crisis. Yeah, why could we find a way as a world community by now to do something about it? Because it wasn't challenged anymore that climate crisis is not real. But these were the debates like even 10 years ago in other countries around the world, especially in the global south. I mean, people didn't have to have the data, they just felt it, that obviously when you grew up cotton 50 years ago and you cannot do it anymore because the soil is now totally torn apart, that there are effects of climate crisis. But we have seen it before, so also giving a positive dimension on it, this is, we can do it again, yeah, even though it gets more tricky. But those actors worldwide have to join forces who believe in facts, who believe in the rule of law, also there we agree, who believe that humans have the same rights all over the planet. And then we might disagree on some politics, but joining forces on the crucial part, I think this is the most important in these times, and this is also where the internet gives the opportunity to interconnect with each other. But at the moment, we are seeing more and more that those are connecting worldwide also via digitalization who would like to destroy the rules-based order. And this is why we have to stand up all together for those who are fighting for it.
Thank you very much. So collaboration, very important. I'm going to give the final word to Carlton. What kind of a mindset do we as journalists have to have, especially for people that live in autocratic regimes, so that they have the courage and the power to stand up against those who are oppressing their people or actually trampling on human rights?
We have the power to change the narrative. I know we've been discussing about tech and all that, and I remembered Facebook is banned in Uganda since 2021. But we have the power to use whatever is within our means to change the narrative, to change the way women are contributing to democracy and how we can inspire the next generation of leaders. So let us use whatever we have. If this platform is banned, use the alternative. There are now quite a number of them, so let us diversify, but also have to really keep ourselves strong and yeah, keep pushing.
Thank you very much. We're gonna have to end it at this point. I know, Maria, you have a lot to say about how to get off the grid, you know, like create our own networks, because you also heard that YouTube might just shut down any moment, and then where do we go with our content? So that will be a discussion for another day. Thank you so much, Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock. Thank you, Maria Ressa. Thank you, Carlton Scovia Nakamia. That was a great discussion. Thank you for your time, and thank you to my wonderful audience.